Hello there! Welcome to the Raphterra channel. My name is Raph and I aim to provide the best Legends of Runeterra content on the internet. I am a master rank player who has played in the professional level of LOR. I've competed in several seasonal tournaments and participated in the qualifiers for the 2021 World Championship. Today, I'm bringing to you my full guide on Pantheon Yuumi, the deck that I used to reach Master Rank Dispatch. After watching this video and after a lot of practice, I'm confident that you will have the skills needed to reach Master Rank as well. I will also put the deck code in the description of this video. Pantheon Yuumi is a deck where you protect and grow small units and turn them into unstoppable big bodies with game-ending keywords. Our key units have the Fated keyword, which allows them to grow the first time you target them each round. In this deck, the Fated units that we are running are Pantheon, Saga Seeker, and Wounded White Flame. The Fated keyword doubles the effectivity of targeted spells like Pale Cascade and Zenith Blade. It even works with targeted unit skills like Bright Steel Protector's Barrier, or with Demasia's utility spells like Concerted Strike and Golden Aegis. We are running Yuumi in this deck because she has very good synergy with Fated units. She helps us grow our units stronger each turn, not to mention her attach keyword also counts as a target trigger for our Fated units. Games with this deck usually go in a similar pattern. Phase 1 starts with the Mulligan. You generally want to look for Saga Seeker, Wounded White Flame, and Yuumi. You want to have a unit to protect and grow in the early to mid game. If you already have these units, you can also consider keeping spells like Sharp Sight and the Zenith Blade. Phase 2 starts when you've successfully played a Fated unit on board. Your main goal during Phase 2 is to protect your Fated unit and to progress Pantheon's level up condition. If you are able to attach Yuumi to a Fated unit early, you will have an advantage against your opponent in the next turns. Phase 2 ends and Phase 3 begins when you can threaten to end the game with either Fated units that have big stats and overwhelm, or with a level 2 Pantheon.
We cry out, no more gods, no more demons!
Such power. Is that you, Atreus?
During Phase 3, you are looking for ways to end the game. You want to combine rally effects with your overwhelm units in order to win. You can end games very quickly if you can pull off multiple attacks with your big, overwhelmed units. A level 2 Pantheon can also single-handedly win you games if he gets the right keywords. Great keywords to get on level 2 Pantheon are Scout and Spell Shield. I personally feel like this deck has one of the most satisfying ways to win games in Legends of Runeterra. Destroying your opponent with an unstoppable demigod warrior or a very big dragon is very hard to top.
Today we stood firm and said, no more!
The most important concept to learn in piloting this deck is mana management. Having banked spell mana is very advantageous in many situations. For example, if you always have 2 mana saved, your opponent will always have to think about Sharp Sight or Pale Cascade. If you can afford to, always pass on turn 2 in order to bank spell mana for future turns. You also want to avoid engaging in combats where you will have to react first to your opponent. Only engage in combats where you will have the stat advantage or when you are confident that you can respond to your opponent's combat tricks. Bright Steel Protector is a powerful tool in this regard. Giving barrier to your units means that your opponent would have to react first when blocking or attacking. If you are up against control decks that have lots of removal cards, you will need to rely on Spell Shield in order to win and end the games. This is where you can utilize our second champion, Yuumi. A trick that you can do with Yuumi is to cast Golden Aegis or Cataclysm on a defensive turn in order to set up a level 2 Yuumi on your next open attack. Now that you have a general idea of how to play the deck, let's go into some sample games against each specific deck type. But before that, if you haven't noticed yet, this video is ad-free so that you can watch continuously without interruption. If you like the content so far and if you want to support me, please like the video and leave a comment. Also consider subscribing if you want more videos like this. For the sample games, I will be showing 3 games against 3 different deck types. For matchups that I will not be able to cover in this video, worry not. I will be posting my usual matchup guides and tips in the deck guides category of my Discord channel. Make sure to join the channel, link will be in the description below. The first deck type that we will delve into is Aggro and Burn. Examples of this deck type are Noir Ziggs, Fizz Yordles in Arms, Rek'Sai, and Elise Spiders. We will go into a sample game I played against a Yordles in Arms deck. This will be a very common matchup that you will face in ranked ladder. When going against these aggro swarm type decks, you want to be able to keep up with the number of units on board. For the mulligan, in addition to Saga Seeker, Wounded White Flame, Yuumi, and Zenith Blade, you will also keep Bright Steel Protector and Mountain Goat in hand. The number 1 card from my opponent that I will be playing around is Yordles in Arms. I must be sure that I am prepared for the turn that my opponent will cast this game-ending spell. In this game, I was offered 2 Bright Steel Protectors in the mulligan, and opted to keep one of them just in case I needed to keep up with tempo on turn 2. I summoned the Bright Steel Protector on turn 2 because my opponent's deck can swarm. Even if I might not get full value out of this barrier, it would still be worth it instead of risking getting swarmed by a wide board. On turn 3, my opponent played Grandfather Fae. I made the misplay of playing Wounded White Flame instead of just attaching Yuumi to my Saga Seeker. I was planning to block the Owlcat with Wounded White Flame, but forgot that Grandfather Fae would give it 1 attack. Because of this misplay, I was forced to go for a trade with my Saga Seeker. I also missed a target proc for Pantheon's level up. I went ahead and attached Yuumi to my Wounded White Flame, which will give me an advantage for the next combat phases. My opponent is now starting to go wide with his low-cost units. I went for the early Cataclysm here in order to reduce his wide board and to save some Nexus HP. This also means that Yuumi will level up on my next attack. Remember, keeping up with the wide board and saving Nexus HP is extremely important against aggro matchups. Surprisingly, my opponent only attacks with 1 unit. This is usually a telltale sign that my opponent must be planning out to cast Yordles in Arms soon. Thanks to Fated, I was able to heal up my wounded white flame just enough to block his attack. At the start of my next turn, I casted Guiding Touch first to see what I would draw. I decided to go for the open attack because summoning additional units will not accomplish anything. My opponent can just play his own units after I summon mine. I do not want to trade 1-for-1 against a swarm deck that can just refill the board very fast. With this attack, my opponent is forced to block to prevent his Nexus from dying. This will give me some time since he will need to refill his board first before casting Yordles in Arms. My opponent begins to establish his wide board while also trying to eliminate some of my blockers. He spends mana trying to go wide next turn, but this leaves him with no mana left to cast Yordles in Arms. However, he can still defend efficiently next turn since we are still not able to find Zenith Blade, and we are not yet able to give our big dragon the Overwhelm keyword. Despite this, I felt that I was still in a good spot because I had a wide board and I could possibly heal my Nexus with Solaris Sunforger in my hand. Unfortunately for my opponent, I was able to draw into one of my win conditions, a Pantheon that is ready to level up. I cast Sharp Sight for the final target proc, and my Demigod Warrior ascends.
I will make the gods remember this day!
With the Overwhelm keyword, I can now deal damage despite his blockers. Swarm decks usually have units with low HP. This means that big Overwhelm units will deal lots of damage to the Nexus. Now, my opponent has to kill me in the next turn or else he will face his death. He finally casts Yordles in Arms after turns of planning for it. He was also able to summon a tasty Feyfolk with Lifesteal. But lucky for us, we can efficiently remove the threat of the lifesteal with our Blinded Mystic. He casts another Yordles in Arms, but it's too late for him. I can just block everything and survive. With level 2 Pantheon delivering the final attack, my opponent surrenders.
Today we stood firm and said, no more.
Of course, when facing these decks, there will always be games where you will not be able to keep up with your opponent's wide board. Against other types of aggro decks, you still want to watch out for their other key cards as well. Examples of these key cards are Noxian Fervor and Decimate for burn decks, or Death in Below for lurk decks. Now we will move on to mid-range decks. Mid-range decks include Demacia Midrange with Shyvana or Galio, Severe Action, and of course, Scouts. The sample game in this video is against Shyvana Galio. A matchup that you will most likely see in your climb due to the popularity of decks running Petricide Broodwing. You are looking for the usual suspects in the mulligan: Saga Seeker, Wounded White Flame, Yuumi, and Zenith Blade. If you already have Saga Seeker or Wounded White Flame, Sharp Sight is also a great card to keep against mid-range decks. Banking spell mana and having mana advantage is crucial against these decks since these games tend to be very combat-centric. The player who can come out on top of combats will take control of the game. In this game, I got 2 Yuumis in hand, which is usually not the best thing, especially in the early game, just because Yuumi's champion spell is not the best spell to have. Thankfully, we got a Saga Seeker before turn 3. Drawing this card fixes our hand entirely. I passed here since my opponent has a challenger card. I could have played the Saga Seeker and hoped that my opponent gets scared of a combat trick, but I don't want to take that risk. After he attacks, I can now safely play my Saga Seeker and set up a Yuumi next turn. This is a great start for us. As long as we play it safe and manage our mana, we will have a great advantage in stats for the next turns. I took the pass and avoided combat here, not only because I don't have any combat tricks, but also because my opponent has the mana advantage. Even if I did have Sharp Sight or Pale Cascade, I would still not take that attack. I can just relax and let Yuumi grow my Fated units. In this spot, I used Prowling Projectile anyway because the card will not be very useful against my opponent's decks. Doing this will also give me a Pantheon proc while also growing my Fated unit. This move is a low commitment play that progresses my win condition while also allowing me to maintain enough mana. At the start of my next turn, I can engage combat safely because we have a huge advantage in stats. I can respond to what my opponent does because I have lots of mana. Not to mention, I also drew my Sharp Sight. Playing a unit here would just put me in a mana disadvantage, and if I'm at a mana disadvantage, I could be forced to not take the attack at all. After my attack, my opponent plays Shyvana, and at this point I can still safely cast Cataclysm. I have the advantage both in stats and in mana. Here, my opponent plays Screeching Dragon. This is another scenario where having Blinded Mystic is great in this deck. There are just matchups where you can just shut down one of your opponent's key units.
Oracle, tell me of my death.
I see two figures dancing forever in silver rain.
I was always mortal.
We are now in a very great spot. Although we haven't been able to give our Saga Seeker overwhelm yet, Pantheon has arrived and is ready to level up.
Get to fighting. Gods, demons, they all must die.
My opponent plays Galio to defend his fortress, but this will not be enough against our Pantheon with Barrier, Scout, and Spell Shield. I attack with my Saga Seeker here because his Galio has a good trade against my Pantheon.
We're gonna find our yordle book.
I didn't mind trading away my Saga Seeker here. I already have a level 2 Yuumi and I can attach her to Pantheon. With an empty board facing my Demigod Warrior equipped with my Magical Cat, it's only a matter of time before I win.
Fire and fury burn in me. Fucking like this.
Strike true, little lioness. Your scars will be repaid in full. Cry war!
Come face me.
In the face of my Scout attack, my opponent casts a flurry of spells, but I have the resources to answer his gallant defense. With no more blockers left to defend the Nexus, Pantheon delivers the final blow. Other popular decks like Severe Action and Scouts have the tendency to play in an aggro pattern and go wide. Against these mid-range decks, you want to somehow keep up with their wideboard too, but you don't need to be overprotective of your Nexus HP. Once again, you can access more details for these matchups in the deck guide section of my Discord channel. Finally, we move on to Control. Control decks include Gnar Timelines, Swain Gnar, Veigar Darkness, and Field Rush Control. We will be facing off against the hottest control deck of the patch, Gnar Trundle Timelines. Against control matchups, nothing changes. You are looking for Saga Seeker, Wounded White Flame, Yuumi, and Zenith Blade. I'd also consider keeping Bastion against these decks since their only way to stop you is to kill your unit with spells. In these matchups, you should generally try to not overcommit into a single fated unit. Control decks will have the tools to punish you if you put all your eggs in one basket. You should be playing around scare cards like Entomb or Buried in Ice in this matchup specifically. If you are facing Shadow Isles control decks, watch out for Vengeance and Ruination. Try to spread your buffs across multiple fated units. Also, do not over-rely on Yuumi because attached units can be obliterated with Entomb or Buried in Ice. From turn 7 onwards is a crucial part of the matchup, and this is usually where the winner is decided. You should always keep Buried in Ice in your mind during these turns. Your opponent will want to play Buried in Ice on turn 7, followed by It That Stares on turn 8. Make sure to plan your moves around this combo. Zenith Blade is a great card to spread around buffs since it will refill itself in your hand if you cast it with Daybreak.
These are troll lands. Nothing's tougher than a troll. These old eyes still see far and clear.
In this spot, I chose to use single combat on Kelp Maidens because I didn't want my opponent to generate any pranks. Pranks could potentially allow him to play around Bastion or my rally effects. In this spot, if I open attack, my opponent could cast 3 Sisters into Entombed and halt my attack. Even if I use Bastion, my opponent could break the spell shield with a Mystic Shot or Pokey Stick. If I develop, I'm expecting my opponent to use Buried in Ice, but then I could respond with Bastion since he would only have 1 mana left. In the scenario that I did not have Bastion in this spot, I would still develop and just hope for the best that he doesn't have Buried in Ice. If he did have Buried in Ice and I didn't have Bastion, I would just lose the game on the spot. It turned out that my opponent didn't have Buried in Ice. Instead, he casted Thermogenic Beam, but Bastion is still a good answer. My Overwhelmed Dragon now starts hitting the Nexus for heavy damage. On turn 8, the Timelines deck will now try to get a free 8-cost unit from Ice Pillar.
It's good to be the king.
Through the dark.
I used Blinded Mystic here just because I don't want to lose to any random shenanigans. After this, I was planning to use Cataclysm to damage the Nexus and to set up a Yuumi level up on my open attack. However, my opponent still has the attack token and my dragon has vulnerable, so I cannot risk my dragon losing health until my opponent attacks. I play Bright Seal Protector to protect my unit, but my opponent plays Iceville Archer, rendering my unit powerless. After the combat, despite my dragon having 0 attack, I still went for the Cataclysm because I wanted to set up the Yuumi level up on the next attack. Having Spell Shield with level 2 Yuumi will make it more difficult for my opponent to stop my wounded White Flame.
We're gonna find our Yordle book.
The next turn, I declare my attack and my opponent surrenders. Now that you know how to play Yuumi against different types of decks, it's time to learn how to modify the deck depending on what you're facing in ladder. The decks that you face will be different depending on your rank, region, and even the time of the day when you are playing. Learning how to tweak your deck is an important skill to learn if you want to climb efficiently. The version of the deck that I used during my climb is leaning towards countering aggro decks. Solari Sunforger is a tech card that I previously did not run, but I was facing lots of burn and swarm decks during my climb, so I opted to add it. If you aren't facing that much aggro, this is one of the cards that you can cut. If you are facing more control decks, you can opt to add in one more copy of Golden Ages. Against midrange or combo decks, removal is key. Adding one more copy of Concerted Strike is a good thing to consider. As a final tip, remember that losing games is normal during climbing, especially once you reach higher ranks. For every game you lose, just make sure you identify the reason why you lost, so that you can learn and improve from it. Take every loss as a learning opportunity. Once again, if you loved this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Good luck climbing!